Toan and Tu Diem returned to visit the old woman. But this seemingly peaceful visit reveals a horrifying truth. The accident was not accidental, and the person behind it may be someone in Toan's family. Amid simple meals and memories gradually returning, a quiet decision is made to uncover the truth buried for years. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes. The car stopped in front of the old house. Tu Diem got out first, smiling when she saw the old woman waiting on the porch, her figure thin, but her eyes still kind. The atmosphere of the visit seemed simple gratitude, but an inexplicable unease welled up in Toan's heart. He looked around the yard. Every tree, every step, everything was the same, like fragments of memories yet to be pieced together. The old woman held Toan's hand, her voice trembling as she asked how he was, making him suddenly feel a lump in his throat. Inside the small house, the three of them sat by the fire, laughter echoing, but the atmosphere remained heavy. Tu Diem clearly sensed the change in her husband. His gaze lingered on the old woman longer than usual. When the old woman inadvertently called Toan by an old name, he froze, his heart pounding. The old woman quickly fell silent, and Tu Diem began to realize that this visit was more than just a thank you. It was like a door had just been opened, leading them back to a past that Toan had never truly understood. Memories stirred as the old woman slowly recounted the day Toan was brought to her unconscious, his body covered in injuries. On that quiet country road years ago, she had found him lying by the grass, without documents, without memory, barely breathing. She took him home and cared for him like her own child, never knowing who he was or where he came from. Toan listened as his thoughts spun, vague images flickering and fading. She described how he woke up in the early days, unable to remember even his own name, his eyes lost like a child, wandering alone. He helped with chores, shared meals with her, and lived quietly for months. Tu Diem tightened her grip on his hand, feeling tension ripple through him. When the old woman mentioned the large scar on his head, her voice softened, as though recalling something she had never dared to speak aloud. Toan touched the scar, a dull ache surfacing unexpectedly. He understood then that the time he lost was not the result of a random accident. It was the beginning of a much larger secret, and the woman sitting before him was the only one who held the missing pieces of his forgotten story. The tension quietly built as the old woman described the days Toan lived in her small house, without a past or a future. Each morning he rose early to help sweep the yard and water the plants, his eyes cautious, as if afraid of disturbing forgotten memories. She said Toan was gentle and reserved, yet often startled awake at night, drenched in sweat, as though fleeing something terrifying. Tu Diem fell silent at that, instinctively glancing at her husband. Toan lowered his head as flashes returned to his mind, screeching brakes, blinding headlights, and an unfamiliar sense of betrayal. The old woman revealed that someone once came searching for Toan, but she lied, claiming she knew nothing, fearing trouble. As she spoke, her hands trembled slightly. Tu Diem realized the woman's silence had not been accidental. It was a choice to protect Toan, but also to bury a truth that, if revealed, would completely alter their present lives. The air inside the small house grew heavy, as if the past itself had quietly taken a seat beside them, waiting patiently for its turn to speak. The true tension surfaced when the old woman lowered her voice and said, Toan's injuries did not resemble an ordinary traffic accident. She clearly remembered the unusual pattern of bruises and impacts, as though the crash had not been random at all. Toan looked up, his heart racing as her words struck doubts he had never dared to name. Tu Diem tightened her grip on his hand, feeling his body tremble. The old woman sighed, admitting she had remained silent for years, fearing the truth might put Toan in danger again. Regret filled her eyes. Toan stepped outside onto the porch, taking deep breaths to steady himself as fragmented memories collided violently in his mind. It was no longer a question of whether the accident was suspicious, but who had caused it. Tu Diem followed, placing a hand on his shoulder, whispering that she was there no matter how cruel the truth might be. When Toan turned back to the old woman, he realized she had done more than save his life. She had guarded a secret powerful enough to shatter an entire family. From that moment on, the peaceful visit became the beginning of a journey to uncover the person behind the incident that stole his memory and changed his life forever. The old woman slowly confessed a truth she had hidden for decades. Before returning to live quietly in the countryside, she had worked as a housemaid in Toan's family home. The grand villa, lavish parties, and conflicts simmering behind closed doors remained vivid in her memory. Toan froze, the air in the room suddenly heavy. Tu Diem could not hide her shock as the impossible connection revealed itself. The woman explained that she had cared for Toan since childhood, knowing his gentle nature and his loneliness within a family marked by constant disputes. When Toan was found injured and without memory, she recognized him almost immediately, yet chose silence. She feared that if the truth surfaced, those who once hurt him would come again. Her voice trembled with regret. Toan realized that her kindness years ago was not merely compassion. It was a quiet act of atonement and a way to protect him from a family whose dark corners she had witnessed firsthand. The story continued as the old woman explained how she confirmed Toan's identity years ago. She recalled a small birthmark on his shoulder, a distinct shape known only to those who had lived long in the house. When she saw it while tending his wounds, all doubt vanished. Toan's heart raced as faint childhood images flickered through his mind. Tu Diem watched him, seeing deep confusion in his every movement. The woman admitted she had struggled with whether to reveal the truth or remain silent. Yet every night, when Toan suffered nightmares, she knew the past still held him. She only wanted him to live in peace, even if it meant burying the truth. Tu Diem held the woman's hand, finally understanding the burden she had carried alone for so long. Toan realized his lost memory was not simply the result of an accident. It was tied to an identity, a family, and relationships he was not yet ready to face. But the door had opened, and there was no returning to the fragile peace they once believed was real. The tension exploded when the old woman revealed the truth that left both Toan and Tu Diem shaken. The person who caused the accident was not a stranger. It was someone within Toan's own family. The air became suffocating. Toan sprang to his feet, ears ringing as he struggled to process the revelation. She explained that on the night of the accident, the family was consumed by fierce disputes over inheritance. Toan was the only one who opposed unethical actions, making him an obstacle. The accident happened shortly after the argument, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. She admitted she had no physical evidence, only what she had witnessed and overheard. Yet her eyes carried absolute certainty. A chill ran through Tu Diem as she realized the family Toan belonged to was not the safe place he once imagined. Silence swallowed the house. In that moment, Toan understood that losing his memory may have spared him from a truth more painful than the accident itself. But now that truth had been spoken, and it would no longer allow him to hide. The tension settled into heavy silence when the old woman admitted she did not know exactly who within the family had caused the accident. She only knew that afterwards some people tried to erase traces, and Toan's name gradually vanished from family conversations. Toan collapsed into his chair, clutching his head as the ground seemed to fall away beneath him. Tu Diem knelt beside him, holding him tightly, finally understanding the cost of knowing the truth. The woman apologized for lacking the courage to speak earlier. Yet she added that if given the choice again, she would still save Toan and remain silent, because at least he had lived a peaceful life for a time. Toan looked up, eyes filled with tears. He realized that an incomplete truth could be more painful than a lie. Toan and Tu Diem accompanied the old woman to the village market in the late afternoon. There were no heavy words or searching glances, only the lively sounds of vendors and the familiar scent of fresh vegetables. The old woman carefully selected each bundle of greens and cuts of meat, casually sharing simple stories from the past, as if trying to keep everything ordinary. Tu Diem followed quietly, offering small smiles, though her thoughts remained unsettled. Toan carried the basket, walking slowly beside the woman, feeling the fragile peace of the moment. Back home, the three gathered in the kitchen. The rhythmic sounds of chopping filled the air as the aroma of cooking rice warmed the small house. When the meal was served, they sat facing one another, eating slowly, no one mentioning the past. Yet in Toan's eyes, Tu Diem noticed a change. This silence was no longer avoidance, but a necessary pause before an important decision. That simple meal was not just a delayed gesture of gratitude, but a quiet marker closing a chapter long overshadowed by incomplete memories. The story concluded on the drive home as night slowly fell, headlights stretching across the empty road. Toan drove quietly, the silence between them no longer heavy. Tu Diem spoke first, recalling the old woman's words, her voice calm yet resolute. She said that if the accident was intentional, they could not pretend ignorance any longer. Toan nodded, eyes fixed ahead. He admitted that the returning memories brought not only pain but responsibility, not to seek revenge but to uncover a truth buried for too long. Tu Diem told him she would stand by his side, no matter how difficult the road ahead became. The car moved steadily forward, carrying a decision formed in silence. As they merged onto the main road leading back to the city, Toan took a deep breath, ready to enter a new chapter of his life. The story ended not with loud confrontation, but with an unspoken promise. They would find the person who deliberately caused the accident years ago, refusing to let the past quietly control their future any longer.
Toan và Tu Diem trở lại thăm bà lão, nhưng chuyến đi tưởng chừng bình yên, nhưng lại hé lộ một sự thật rùng mình về quá khứ. Qua những lời kể chậm rãi, Toan dần nhớ lại quãng thời gian mà chỉ nhớ sau một tai nạn không hề ngẫu nhiên. Bà lão cũng thú nhận là người hầu trong gia đình của Toan năm xưa và đã nhận ra anh ngay khi cứu giúp, nhưng đã chọn im lặng để bảo vệ anh. Bà tiết lộ tai nạn năm xưa có liên quan đến mâu thuẫn tranh chấp trong gia đình, và kẻ đứng sau có thể là người thân của Toan. Những ký ức đau đớn dần quay lại, buộc Toan đối diện với sự thật chôn vùi. Kết thúc chuyến đi, Toan và Tu Diem âm thầm đưa ra quyết định không trốn tránh quá khứ nữa, mà cùng nhau tìm ra chân tướng để quá khứ không còn điều khiển tương lai của họ.